Well, hello, Haley.
Hi, Brian.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm excited. We have two guests, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation with Raya Jones and her dad, Joe Jones. And what makes this a really interesting conversation, especially given our overall theme of the hero's journey, is that Raya is transgender woman, and her dad and she have a podcast, which they do as dad and transgender daughter. And Haley, you should know Raya and Joe that Haley, when we first met a couple of years ago now, Haley talked about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people having a superpower, and she just so admires uh, what it takes to come out and put a face on the issue. So welcome, Raya and Joe. And Haley, do you feel like starting off with the first question?
I don't even know where to start. I have so many, but obviously, welcome and thank you for joining us. And I think my first question is to Raya. Today, if somebody asks you, are you a woman? Are you a man? Are you transgender? Or how do you describe yourself and what are you comfortable
So I
with?
would always describe myself as a woman. And by the way, thank you so much for having us here. That
Mhm.
we're very, very grateful to be here. Yeah, so I would always describe myself as a woman, and depending on the context, I may continue to say I'm a transgender woman, but sometimes I will just leave that out of the conversation entirely.
Yeah.
Um, for my work, I work, this is actually the headset that I use at work, and I work a phone job. So I have calls coming in all the time, and I don't identify. People hear my voice and they just assume that I'm a cisgender woman, and I'm okay with that. We just kind of let things go that way. So um,
Mhm.
she, her pronouns, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've met a lot of transgender women in my life, many of whom are friends. Some want to, take on the issue, and it's very important to them that they use transgender. Others say, look, I'm moving on with my life. I'm a woman. I now want to live my life fully. You guys, fight the battle. I fought my own. So it's not, Haley, the answer is it's different for everybody.
and that was sort of my question was like, you know, I'm we all make these massive life choices to go towards better and to be in a place where we feel freer and more free to express who we are. So I wanted to check with Ryan to see sort of, are you also at a point in your life where you feel free in expressing yourself, or do you feel that you're still having to fight to express yourself?
So that's a great question. I feel like the challenge, especially for a binary transgender person, that I just want to blend in under the radar, and just sort of, so like at work for my coworkers, I have not come out to any of them as transgender. So I transitioned 9 years ago, and I have lived exclusively as a woman since then. I have never, I don't bring it up, although I do some LGBTQ um, things at work where I'll lead some exercises and things. Um, in that scenario, I will generally still not disclose that I'm transgender, but I will say I'll do a little bit of education, say many transgender people don't feel comfortable disclosing that they're transgender. And if you happen to know somebody is transgender, you want to make sure not to out them. And if they haven't talked to you about it, then don't talk to them about it. Although you can bring up other kinds of issues and see if they're interested in talking about it to sort of bite on it. But if they don't, probably they don't want to talk about it. Now, that
Yeah.
said, Dad and I have a podcast about our relationship. specifically with my transition and me being a transgender woman. So, you know, I can say that I don't tell people, but I'm very open about the fact of who I am in that context. So it's very context dependent.
Joe, talk to us about 9 years ago. Did you have an inkling before then that Raya was going to be transitioning or, claiming her true gender when she was little? When did it start to occur to you?
The day she told me, I had no idea. I was completely blindsided by it. But when she said it, the first thing that I did not react. I didn't react positively or negatively. I was just quiet and sat there. But the first thought that came into my head, either I accept her or I lose her.
Mhm.
There's nothing in between.
That's right.
And I wasn't going to lose her. So we were we were best friends when uh, before she transitioned during that whole time. In fact, I even wrote a song, uh, my best friend, and it was never a problem for me that it came out. But I can tell you, up until the day that she said that, I was on the other side. I was not, I would not have been called an ally. Now, I wasn't a militant or anything against it, but I was the person who I had a whole rendition of great jokes,
Yeah.
which and in fact, Ryan would share those with me sometimes. We did happen to have a transgender woman who worked with us, and we used to comment between the two of us about that. And it's something I wouldn't do now, but I grew a lot from the day she came out. I I accepted it. I wasn't going to fight it. I was going to accept it, but I would not say that I was affirming. It took a while to get there, and actually, I'm still learning. But I'm at the point now where I not only accept it, but I am so proud of her, and I'm so proud of what she's done. It was my idea to come up with the podcast. And when I did come up with the podcast, she bought into it right away. And as we did the podcast, we've done close to 100 podcasts now, and I've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah.
And I can say, and not only am I proud of her, I would say that I am I am a very vocal ally,
Good for you.
which really helps the whole situation for me personally. And Ryan and I, not only were we close as uh, 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 prior to this, but we're even closer now. That this podcast has drawn us closer together to make us really feel as though we are truly a good, solid team, and again, best friends more so than ever.
Raya, can I ask about other family members?
Sure.
What kind, who would be impacted and how did they respond?
Okay, so we could probably talk about the three different levels. So there's mom and dad.
Yeah.
And so I think it was harder for mom. Again, she was never negative. She never said any kind of disparaging words or anything. But I think it was harder for her to fully accept who I was. Not
Mhm.
that she was ever against, but it was just, it took her a while to start using my pronouns. And she would call me Rye for a while, or Rai, or some kind of a shortened name. My name Raya is very close to what my old name was. Now I will
Mhm.
never say that name out loud because it feels yucky to me to ever refer to myself with that old name. But I have
Mhm.
no problem telling people that I used to share a name with Ryan Seacrest. Somehow, when I say it about somebody else, that's
Yeah.
fine. But I can't say the word in reference to myself. And I actually really appreciate that when dad tells stories about me before my transition, he will use my correct pronouns now and retroactively. So when I came out to him, I was presenting male, but he still refers to me then as she, and I really appreciate that.
So your first name was Seacrest?
Yeah, we don't say that. Um,
We just
then
say C.
probably from there, then the second most important relationships, well, or first most important relationships, but the second level of people that I told were my children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was married. I was married in what I thought was a straight marriage at the time. My wife and I were married for 17 years before we did end up getting a divorce, specifically because I transitioned. So
Mm-hmm.
she didn't sign up to be married to a woman. But we're still friends. We still help one another with the kids and do all kinds of things together. We have a very good working relationship. We're still family. But then we had 7 children together. So my oldest is 23 and my youngest is 12. So we have the whole gamut in between there, none of them twins, no blended family or anything. We just had a very big family. And the kids, I would say it actually was the easiest on the youngest kids. Because when you're younger, I think they were maybe 3 and 5 when I transitioned. So for them, they just were told, oh, our dad's a girl now. And they said, that's it. And they just, it took them about 5 minutes and they just assimilated that. I think because the whole world is so new for them, they
Mm-hmm.
just assimilated this new information about me. As we got older, the older the kids got, the harder it was for them because they knew me one way. And my oldest daughter, I think I have a very, very good relationship with her now, but she was the hardest at first. She didn't want to see me at first. The very first time that I got to meet them again, presenting female, we chose to do it at a park where it was kind of a neutral location. The kids were all playing, and then they could kind of come over, and I came and sat on a park bench. And then they would sort of come over, and the youngest kids, no problem. And then, oh, okay, well, this is fine. And then they went back and played. My oldest daughter came over for about a minute or two, and then she said, yeah, I need to go over there now. And it took her quite a while, probably a month or maybe a couple months. And what finally broke things, now she'll tell the story a little differently from her side. She just decided, I want to have a relationship with both parents. And so that means that I accept that my dad is no longer a man anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
we actually did for many years choose that I would still be dad with she, her pronouns. About 4 years ago, I said, you know what, that just doesn't feel right anymore. And so now I'm still not mom. Their other, so their other parent is mom, and I'm just their parent, and they call me Raya. But now we all have very good relationship. And then my sister as well. She accepted me right away. She had some questions and things, but she was probably the easiest of anyone because she was immediately an ally, and I only have the one sister. So family was very accepting, but different levels of how long that took.
Haley? I think Haley's frozen.
Oh, I think we
So
have, yeah.
that's okay. So I'm gonna keep going if I can. So would you consider your sister is the third level? Haley, you back with us?
I'm back.
Why don't you take over now? You heard this great explanation.
Well, I have two questions, but the most prominent probably is the level of acceptance that I'm hearing in sort of you being able to tell your family and sort of your 3 levels. Like the word acceptance comes out, and a very strong emotional acceptance. Why? Why was your family accepting of your decision? What was different in your family, or what happened that made it certainly not easy, but the acceptance a little bit more open and gentle?
I think so. I can speak to that, but I'm also curious about Dad's answer on this. I would say we just grew up that we love one another and that relationships come first. that we've always known. So Dad always said to me every night and every time I would leave, and any time he would say, I love you. And a lot of parents don't always do that, but I always grew up with that. And then I've done that with my kids. I will always say, I love you. And some of the older boys have not, that's a little too weird for them. And so they don't say it back, although they've started a little bit more now. So maybe they're sort of coming around, but there was a while where they were, as teenage boys, that was not cool to say I love you to my parent. But I've always wanted to make sure that they know that I love them. And I learned that from Mom and Dad.
Haley?
I wanted to check with Joe on his answer to that.
Oh, well, yeah, I completely agree with what Raya said. And as I said in the beginning, when she came out, the first thing I said was nothing at all. And she understood from that reaction that she wasn't going to get a negative reaction. It did take me a while to accept it, but I never said, well, why are you doing that? You can't do this, or it was never argumentative. And as a matter of fact, as a family, through all the years we've been together, we rarely had arguments as a family. In fact, I can't even think of one. If there was an argument, it was about what we were going to have for dinner, probably. And there really
Maybe
wasn't
when I
much.
didn't do my homework,
Yeah.
we had a few of those.
Or something you don't understand, having lived in Florida. Maybe not shoveling the driveway.
I grew up in Michigan.
Oh, there
I
you
know
go.
about snow.
But we did have such, and do have from the very beginning. We've had a loving relationship. In the beginning, our family was just the two of us, my wife and me. And she set a great example because she came from a loving family. And I came from a loving family. My mother and father were uh, very, very close and always open. I never saw them argue with one another. And so I guess that was kind of our personality and the way we lived together. And
Mm.
uh,
Joe,
we set that as an example.
pull the mic closer to your mouth if you would, Joe.
Oh, okay. I
There
took
you
it
go.
away because I realized you couldn't see my face. So,
Yeah.
okay. But I just felt that we set the tone, and I think they all followed, which I think made it much easier for all of us.
Is there a faith component there? Was religion a part of your life growing up at all?
It was, but actually it got a lot stronger for me in 2019. And at that point, I had bypass surgery and something I didn't expect. I was a runner. I just had to run a marathon. And in fact, 2 weeks before that, I just told Ryan we were walking. We had a fitness path in our yard, and we were walking the fitness path. And I said, I'm really doing pretty well here. I'm in my 70s and I'm feeling great. I have no problems at all. And I was telling her how great I was feeling and how wonderful it was. And 2 weeks later, I had bypass surgery, which surprised me and everyone in the hospital as well. So, but when I came out of that, the first thought I had is that I know where I'm going. And because I know where I'm going, and it's not, I hope, I think, well, maybe if I do, no. One of the things I really like about the religion that I follow is that I feel as though we are to have life in our fullest. I'm in. That's what I'm doing. I'm having life in my fullest. And I'm doing that by holding on to and strengthening the relationship I have with.
I can't speak for Haley, only for myself, but I didn't have that kind of relationship with my father and would like to have had that. My dad, who's old, Joe, you and I are the same generation, but my dad was what was called um, the greatest generation. He just wanted to be dad. He was your dad. and you weren't friends. You obeyed your father. And I gave, he lived in hell with me because I gave a hell of a time on almost
Well,
every issue one could think of. But
well,
go
believe it
ahead.
or not, Ryan, that Brian, it's true also of me, because until I was 6 years old, I lived with my real father, and I in my memoir, I tell a few stories about that. I was always afraid around him. He never hit
Mm,
me, but he was very abusive in other ways.
hmm
So when my mother and father got a divorce, my mother remarried, and I asked the person she married to adopt me because he was the father I never had, and he
uh,
turned out to be a wonderful father, set
mm,
a great example, and that's what I grew up with. And that was from I think they got married when I was 9 years old, and when I was 12, I was adopted, and it
that's great.
changed my life. And I'm the one that instigated the whole idea, and so I've had both kinds of fathers.
Haley, I want to find out if I can. I'm just curious. What do you do on Thanksgiving? What's what who's around the table at Thanksgiving?
For me,
No, no, for
um,
for Raya and Haley. I want you at my table at Thanksgiving. I'm,
I'll be there. I'm there in spirit always.
yes, you are. But Raya and Joe, what is a typical Jones family holiday?
It's everybody. It's all of the grandchildren. When possible, our daughter and son-in-law and two granddaughters in Texas join us in Wisconsin for our Thanksgiving. They can't. They'd like to each year if they can, but it's not always possible. But we not only have those, sometimes we have another guest as well. So that, but we're all there, and we have a great Thanksgiving dinner, usually around 1 o'clock, and then in the afternoon, our family loves to play games.
Mm.
So they get together and they play board games or they play word games and a variety of things, and that really keeps us connected. It's a lot of fun. It makes getting together even more enjoyable.
One
Right.
person that Dad didn't mention because he just thinks of her as family, but my ex-wife is part of that. She
Oh
comes to
yes.
every holiday. She is there. She is part of the family as much as anybody else is part of the family, and that's really been
Mhm.
good for the kids and really been good for us.
Raya and Joe, what is the meaning or what is the backstory on the name of your podcast, Transdescendant?
Oh, that's a name I came up with. She is transgender and she is my descendant. So I came up with the name
Can you see
Transdescendant.
that there? There,
Yeah,
Oh,
we
there
I
you
have a
go.
mug
love
there.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's our logo there. And you
And
can go to transdescendant.com. We'll bring you right
yes,
to our podcast or
yes.
search it
And by
wherever
the
you get
way,
your podcasts.
some people will mistakenly spell it at the end with a ENT. It's not, it's an ANT, and you'll find it that way. But after we chose the name and after we began actually doing the podcast, I decided to go to Chat GBT and ask, what do you think of that name? And they thought it was a great name. They say in a lot of things, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a website or something, the more unusual it is, the more likely you are to be able to make it something that people will remember and stick with. So I'm very happy that Chat GBT endorsed our name.
I like the play on words that it sounds so much like transcendent
Mhm.
of going above and beyond, of crossing, of being bigger than. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do as well. In fact, when Dad first mentioned the word, I thought that's got to be a real word. And I didn't realize that we had to look transcendent. That's not a real word. And so, yeah, I like that
It
we
is
get
now.
that double. Yeah. that we get that kind of double meaning in there.
It crosses many different worlds.
Mhm.
And
Yes,
I
it
think
does.
sort of that's a segue into my next question. You know, we've spoken about the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. You know, do you consider yourselves a spiritual family or a religious family, or are you just the Jones?
I would say, I don't use the word religious. That means something different to me. I say I'm a believer. Am I religious? No, not very much so. By that I think people who are going through all of the motions and doing this and acting different around the pasture and those kinds of things. I don't do that, and I don't think our family does either. Um, they are not. All of our grandchildren are not um, strong in their faith. They're pretty weak in it, like I was, like Raya was, uh, and I think that's something. I'm 80 years old, so at this stage, it's going to be stronger for me, which it is for most people because they realize, oh, they're at the end of their time. But for me, it's different. It's not, oh, I'm at the end of my time. For me, I feel if God gives me another 20 years, great. If he takes me tomorrow, even better. I am not afraid of it. Yeah, it's nothing. It's wonderful. So I think it helps me to round out my life, and I think I try to be an example for my grandchildren and for my children. And although Raya is more of an example of that than I am, Raya has been in a seminarian and has been a preacher at some point, so that makes it a lot
Yeah.
different too.
So my background, I've been through the whole journey with that. When we talk about the hero's journey, I've been through every part of the religious experience that you could want. I've probably been there. I was baptized Catholic and confirmed Lutheran, and then I was rebaptized as an evangelical charismatic fundamentalist Christian. I became a pastor. I thought that that's what I was going to do with my whole life. I was Assemblies of God for a while. I was Episcopalian. I don't know if faith is really working for me. I've been through the whole gamut of everything. And I would say I'm still on that journey right now. Faith is um, not as comfortable for me right now after um, some of what I've been through, but it still is very much in there. And I expect that there'll be more with that story in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, yeah, I've definitely been on a journey and it's been a lot. And
One of the
and my
one of the,
ex-wife is actually still very much in that much more conservative branch of faith that we used to be in together. And so that has been one extra challenge in navigating things.
mhm,
But again, we understand that
yeah.
there are places where we just need to agree to disagree, and that's gone
Act,
very well.
Yeah,
Actually, on our podcast about 3 or 4 episodes ago, there was one uh about that entire subject, and it was called "Can you can you be a believer and still be an ally?"
Can,
or something like that.
right. It was, can you be an ally and still hold to biblical morality?
Yes,
Because coming from that strongly conservative background, a lot of people, and I would include myself in this as well at one time, not any longer, but there was a time where I felt like the two are not compatible. And one of the first pieces that helped me to change my own perspective, Brian, was actually reading your book.
mm,
In Sex Camp, you talk about one of the speakers gets up and is presenting about faith issues and talks about that everything we know from science shows that LGBTQ people are just as healthy as anyone else. And it was the first time that I ever stopped to look at it through the lens of, is this healthy or not? And
mhm.
for me, it was actually ironically accepting other people in the LGBTQ community first, and then that cracked the door open so that then I could begin exploring for myself.
One of the things that I experienced myself, Raya, is, I've always wanted to be a minister, And I finally accepted that, I have been, and, you have been, you're doing it in your podcast. You're doing it in your, response to other transgender people. We are ministers. We're just not ministers with black shirts and, white. I almost wore a black shirt today, but it makes me look very priestly. But I think and you'll read in my memoir that's coming out this year that faith was an essential part of my coming out. I mean, my spirituality, the Holy Ghost was part, the Holy Spirit was part of my coming out process. I don't know, Haley, if I know you believe in the Spirit. Haley is a very spiritual person. And I hope she says something a little bit about that. Haley.
I mean, from me, I feel like I'm similar to Raya. My experience with religion has been the entire gamut. It started off Christian, and then it went to Judaism, Kabbalism, then it went to Islam, then it went to Hindu. So it's been pretty much every part where I've been like, oh, what about that? What about that? How are they linked? So at the point, there's one. And I see very much that it is all the same thing. It's just different languages, different words. And, I very much agree with you, Brian, in that I think part of having faith, being a believer, and being curious, it's sort of one of those very unconscious benefits is that you do become an example. You do become a preacher just by your experience. And for me, that's a far more authentic preaching than somebody that just aligns with it but doesn't actually follow it or doesn't actually align with it.
Right. Somebody who's ordained but doesn't really have any knowledge to share.
Right.
One of the things that strikes me is that if I was a transgender person watching this or your podcast, I'd be jealous, of the support that you have from your dad and also from your kids. I'd be jealous because most transgender people, at least in the beginning, don't have that kind of support.
It's true. And one of the difficult things about my story that I don't share very often, although we have addressed it on a few of our episodes, but the breaking point for me was a point where I said, I'm not sure that I want to continue going on any longer. And so, I did attempt, and
Suicide.
yeah, it's not something I didn't try very hard, but as soon as I tried, I realized I didn't care if I succeeded. And Dad was the one that really sat me down and said, if this is where you're at right now, you need to do whatever it takes to keep yourself healthy so you can be here for your kids. And I realized that at that moment, I had been viewing transitioning as a selfish act. And I realized that if I'm not true to myself, I'm not helping them. I'm not there for them as a parent as they need. And that year leading up to the transition was very, very difficult. I was a black cloud. It was not easy. But with all of that and with the support that I've had from Dad, that's one of the reasons why we decided to do this podcast, is because we felt like with the strong relationship that we have, I have been incredibly privileged with that. And we would like to model that for other people. How can other people do this? And so we have the majority of our audience are not LGBTQ people themselves. We figure it's probably about 60% allies and 40% people in the LGBTQ community. And so it's really so much for the allies of how can we be more supportive? How can we maintain stronger relationships? How can we make sure that we're there so that we don't regret pushing somebody to actions that, we regret that we were not there for them when that time comes. So.
Uh-huh.
I I think Ray, you raise for me a very truthful point, and that is, we talk about acceptance, especially in this call, and the love that is in your family, but that doesn't negate how hard it was, or how hard, each of our individuals are. We may reach a point where we can smile and laugh and tell our stories with lightness, but my God, it was hard getting there. And I think that's what's not only unique, but also similar to everybody that sort of goes through the path to align with their true self and be their truth. It's never easy.
Mm-mm.
I always think of it like coming up to a door that's very scary, and you see this door and it looks like it's this old Gothic door and it's got the big knocker, and you think, I don't want to open this door. But when you finally get the courage to open it, all of a sudden it's like the Wizard of Oz when it's rainbows, when it's all of a sudden it's in color. Everything before that was black and white, but all of a sudden I opened this door and it was very scary to open it. But I walked through and the sun was shining and there were flowers everywhere. And it just felt like, is this what life is supposed to be about? So I can't say that strongly enough to people that are scared about what might be coming, is that, yes, it's difficult, but it is so worth it.
Much better. So worth it. I think we can all agree that it is so worth it.
It liberates you to become your full self. I mean, until you come out of the closet as transgender, lesbian, gay, whatever issue it is that you're hiding, there's no way that you're going to be able to die a full person. You're going to die with regrets, and I don't think any one of us wants to die with regrets. And once you open that door, and as soon as you said it, I imagined the Wizard of Oz too. Walking into all of these colors, but one thing I do want to say, and I've been writing about this lately, is that we can't forget the fact that our coming out impacted people who love us, and suddenly they lost anonymity. Your children now had a parent who was transgender, and that was not going to change. And then, so the rest of their lives, they have to deal with that card that's been dealt to them, whether they embrace it or not. When parents, and that's true for your mom and dad, we have a transgender daughter. And it never lets up, at parties, at card games, at golfing, whatever it is that you find yourself doing, and people start talking about family. You either sit back and kick yourself for not speaking up, or you speak up and risk, dealing with resistance. I've always found that speaking up is the only alternative. I have, not speaking up doesn't work for me.
One of the things I recently discovered is that by becoming so comfortable and so proud of what Raya has done, I can't wait for the opportunity to share with others.
Mm-hmm.
So I look for an opportunity whenever I can. And what I've discovered, each time I've done that, it has opened another door for me and for our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I spread the word whenever I can. And it's really helped a lot. And I am surprised. Not one time has anyone ever said anything negative to me about that.
Mm-hmm.
I expected it. I know I have some friends who are not really accepting. They say they're accepting but not affirming, but they're not. I'm thinking of one person in particular who still remains friends of mine, but has not accepted any of this idea. But I keep sending him copies of our podcast anyway, and he listens to them. And
Mm-hmm.
you never know. It's something might resonate. What I have come to understand, and what we keep bringing up continually, is that LGBTQ people are normal. It's a
Yeah.
normal thing. It's not a disease. It's not a personality uh odd thing. No, it's just part of what
It's
we are.
we're
We
It's
talk
people.
it's God's
we talk
intention.
about, yeah. We
It-
God has not made anyone to be totally perfect. So each of us has some things that are different than other people. That doesn't necessarily make them bad or wrong. It's just we have different things. And sometimes some of those things are things that you can correct. So we mentioned in one of our podcasts, for example, if somebody's born with a cleft palate, is it wrong for them to try to correct that? Of course not. If somebody is born with a head and a heart that are female, but what's between their legs is male, is it wrong for them to correct that? Of course not. I mean, these are all kinds of things that when you look at it from a broad perspective, they're all normal. It's okay.
Now,
I think that if, go
Dad, you
ahead.
were not always that way, though.
No, I wasn't.
You were not always an LGBTQ ally or an evangelist for that, that it's okay to be yourself. You have told me stories about how difficult it was for you to first talk about things.
Oh, yeah. When the first few months, I didn't want to tell anybody.
Mm.
And when I finally did, I told somebody who wasn't in our community, but lived in a community 150 miles away. And then, and unfortunately, his response was the kind that he said, "Holy shit," which is no surprise.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of figured everybody would say. But now that they know how proud I am of it and how accepting I am, I never get a reaction like that.
I think that's the difference. And I can, be compassionate with what you're saying, Joe, because I come from a very difficult family background. I'm straight, but I have had sort of that separation in my family because of my choices and how I choose to live. And I have found through sort of my journey in coming to peace with it. Now, when people ask me, or people like, so what are you going to do? When I respond with joy, when I respond with peace, 9 times out of 10, they're okay with it. Of course, there's always going to be the people that are like, there's always going to be those. But I do find, like, as I've moved through the process of acceptance, of coming to joy with it, and actually allowing myself to express the relief and the joy that is now, people are far more accepting because I'm putting it out in that energy of it's actually a good thing.
I feel as though
Joe,
I'm on this journey right now, and I know how much my eyes have been opened. I have a friend down here in Texas who uh, is very intelligent, seems a very logical person, and a strong believer who is a flat earther. Are you kidding me? And I think, and no matter what you say, you're not going to convince him differently. No, he believes that the earth is flat, and that's true for him.
hmm,
No matter what I say, no matter what I could do, is not proof for him that that's the case. I feel that people who are on the other side of not understanding the LGBTQ issue are like that. They're the people who, no matter what you say, you're not going to convince them that the earth is really round. They just don't.
and unless they have a family member, usually it's easy for people to be in denial, to be hostile, to oppose until one of their own children. And this is true around the world,
Yes,
because
I
I've had
agree
the
with that.
opportunity to speak in other cultures. When parents have to choose between the love of their child or the approval of their church, they most often will pick the love of their child
Of course.
because
Yep.
they don't, it's them. They brought this into the world and they want to protect it. And I imagine, Joe, that some of the people listening to your podcast have sort of adopted you as their dad. Their own dad wasn't so hot, but you're cool, so they listen in because they want to hear what their dad has to say.
Well, I would consider that the ultimate compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Raya, I have a question for you. Your journey, obviously you had to get divorced. Was that something that you had to grapple with, sort of coming from a loving family, coming from sort of a lot of stability, and now you're getting divorced? Did you have to deal with, or did you ever feel sort of that guilt of being divorced and that being like that kid that wasn't able to hold it together?
That's a really insightful question. Yeah, that was very, very difficult. We had such a strong marriage. We did all of the things right. We learned how to communicate really well. Everyone around us thought we would never get divorced. And so when it came time to that, honestly, I held out hope for a long, long time. Even after the divorce, I probably held out hope that maybe there would be some way that we could, get back together eventually or something. And it has been a very slow process to accept that, no, this is just how it is. And sometimes life doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like. Yeah, it was very difficult. There were a lot of nights of tears as a result of that. Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I think the breakup of any marriage is hard, but particularly the breakup of a marriage where it wasn't either of our faults. There wasn't, neither of us had cheated. Neither of us had, you know, uh, stopped communicating with one another. No, we had great communication. We talked through everything. We worked out every fight. We were so close together. It was really, really hard to lose that relationship. So, I'm very grateful for what we have right now, but no, it's still difficult because it's nothing like it was. And while we are absolutely still family, she has done things where, you only sacrifice for family. She's done things for me like that of, one time I had forgotten my wallet and I was a half-hour drive away and I ran out of gas. And she drove there. This is after the divorce. She drove there and put gas in my car so that I could get where I needed to go. That's the kind of thing that you do for family. And I feel like we will always have that, but yet
You could
it's hard
mention
for
the
us.
wig as well. The wig and
Oh, yes. So when again, early in my transition, I mean, I have male pattern baldness, so this up here is not real. This down here is real, but this up here, I have to get store-bought. And at the beginning, I did not know what I was doing, was I was so scared with everything. And she said, "Here, let me help." And she brushed out my wig and she helped me with some makeup and she helped me get through because we had that kind of care and compassion for one another. And I can't imagine how difficult that was for her, but I'm just so grateful for the years that we had together and for the fact that I still have her in my life, even if it's not
Yeah,
where I would have
still
chosen
love.
it to be. Absolutely. It's a different kind of love now, but it is still love.
I think you
Beautiful.
ought to write about it, Raya. I mean, I think you have a really interesting story to tell uh, about how, and give examples of driving to give gas and helping with, because most people would assume that it would be a hostile breakup, because, this is not what I expected. I'm going to go make myself happy by finding what I really want. And your story is different than that. And the kids and your dad and your mom, I think I think you ought to start writing about it.
That's good. Yeah, I'll consider that. Thank you. We did originally talk early on that maybe we would want to do a book together to talk about our experience because it was so difficult, and especially for her to find resources at that time,
Mm.
because it's easy to talk about my journey, but she went on a journey as well. And it
Oh,
was
yeah.
very difficult for her to lose a husband because I was not who she thought I was. That was incredibly, incredibly difficult on her. And yeah, she had a lot of support from other people and found people, but yeah, it was not easy by any means for her.
Interesting that it's so hard to find support for love.
Yeah.
Like, because when I hear your story, it just rings true of humanity. And all I hear is like, this is the truth of us humans. This is how we are, and this is how we were created. And hopefully, this is how we can share an example of how we should all be behaving, or a little bit closer to how we should be behaving. But, it made me think like, you can go to the store any day, and there's 100 books on how to get through conflict, how to create conflict, everything. But to find a book on love, just good old how to be a loving person and how to accept love, is incredibly difficult.
And I do feel like the best way to get it is to see it modeled. There's so
Yeah.
much of how we're wired as humans is with those mirroring neurons. And when we see other people behaving how we want, it's much easier to copy that than it is to try to go to a book and learn it. And I feel like as much as we can do, that's what we want to do. We just want to model for other people. I think we have something really special, and I would like other people to see how that works and to just say, I want to do that same thing for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you go to conferences for transgender people and their allies?
I don't know. I mean, we do some events here and there for LGBTQ issues in general and ally kinds of things. Early on, I did a lot more things because I needed the support
Right.
for my transition, people teaching me just simple things of how do you go about your name change and what do you ask the doctor for, and here's some hormone advice, and here's just all of those kinds of, here's how you do makeup differently as a transgender woman versus as a cisgender woman, those kinds of things. But after that first year, I didn't need so much that community, but we do try to stay very connected with the greater LGBTQ community. And in fact, we've tried to be modeling loving relationships, not just in terms of transgender people in the family, but all LGBTQ people. So whether it's somebody coming out as gay or lesbian or bisexual or just queer in general, how do we keep those family relationships strong?
One of the things that we are doing because we think it's good stewardship as podcasters, we are working on starting a P-flag group in our community. And it makes some sense because there's a much larger community to the east of us, about 45 minutes away, that has a population of 65, 66,000, and one to the west of us that's about 30 minutes away that has a population of about another 40,000. They both are interested in starting P-flag groups, but they don't have anybody to be a spark plug to start it. So as podcasters, we plan to start a P-flag group, and we're going to hold it in the Episcopal Church. And I think uh, we're we're hoping to start that as quickly as we can. I think we're going to have an organizational meeting sometime in April.
I think you should both propose a workshop for the next PFAG National Conference. And
Oh,
we're proposing to do a workshop on father-daughter and how we not only came together but created a podcast. I think it would be a very, very popular workshop.
that's a great
Um,
idea.
yeah,
Thank you.
And what do you know where that's going to be?
I don't, but all you need to do is Google.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
God bless Google. All you have Google, PFLAG National Conference, and it'll tell you when, where, whatever. Because
I'll look
even,
into it, Raya.
yeah, right, even though you've, come to peace with who you are, you have a gift to share. And with your dad, this is a really unique story. I would make sure that at least you offered people the possibility of hearing the story.
That's good. Thank you. Yes, I think that is completely something we would love to do. And in fact, before my transition, Dad and I worked together and we would go do seminars on business topics together. So this would not be the first time that we've done that sort of thing.
That'd be great. Haley, are you frozen?
We're almost out of time, so I wanted to sort of offer sort of the last few thoughts or comments that anybody might have.
Well, I would just like to tell people how they could find our podcast.
Please.
And they can actually, once they find our podcast, they could go back all the way to the very beginning. We started our podcast on September 1st of 2023. And we are now a year and a half into it. We've got almost 100 podcasts out there. They have a lot of different titles, and we talk about a lot of different subjects, including having Brian on one of those. He's coming up, I think, next week. Is that right, Ryan?
It's posting on Monday. So by the time
Yes.
this airs, it's probably the most current one. Whenever you're posting this on YouTube is when we'll post it. I listen to podcasts on Spotify, so that's as easy as anything, or a lot of people do. What is it? Apple Podcasts? I don't know. I have an Android, so I don't know. iTunes, whatever that is. You Apple people out there, I don't know. So we're on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, and you can actually just search right there, Transcendent, and we should come up.
Yes, as long as you spell it correctly. And when there's a little podcast app on everybody's phone. Click on the podcast app and you can do search, put in there Transcendent, Transcendent, and you will find it. And and we'd like your feedback as well. And if you'd like to ask us any questions or talk to us about any of that, you can reach us at transcendent@gmail.com.
This has been a fun interview for me. And I know for Haley, all the loving energy that's swirling around, it's it fills your heart with a smile. So we thank you both for taking the time to join us. Yeah.
Thank you for
inviting us.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. I have to remember what day we're on. And lovely. Thank you for your time. So much love.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Good.
Bye.
Stay on for a second, Ryan.